Now that the remake for Resident Evil 4 is released and cementing itself as a major Capcom success, let's look at a possible and probable path for Capcom to take if they do decide to remake Code Veronica next, and how Resident Evil 4 Remake set it up for success. Since Capcom skipped Code Veronica to remake Resident Evil 4, ideally that would mean it's next, even if the end credits may tell us otherwise. To be clear, that end scene does not guarantee any future plans Capcom has. It simply sets up a slight amount of info for that game whenever Capcom gets around to it. Seeing as Resident Evil 2 Remake left details to set up Code Veronica and Capcom skipped it to 4, tells you exactly how they like to operate. Out of order. Especially since Resident Evil 9 will most likely actually be next, unless the B team has an unpleasant surprise for us. How does Resident Evil 4's remake translate to a successful interpretation of Code Veronica? Let's all be honest with ourselves, we can all admit Resident Evil 4 Remake isn't a one-to-one remake. It's a reimagining, using the original as a baseline for how to make it, making lots of changes, both large and small, to craft what Capcom saw as an overall better end product. Most would agree they did just that, fixing a lot of issues from a nearly 20-year-old game, modernizing it, and connected the dots a bit better this time around, as seen like the transformation of Luis as a character, fitting in better and more effectively along the way. But how does this translate to Code Veronica? Based off of what Resident Evil 4 Remake did and how Capcom went about it, we know that if they do remake another Resident Evil game, whether it's Code Veronica, 0, the original, 5, or something else, they've given us a solid foundation on what they like to do.
What are you, my mother?
We know they tweak and edit the storyline, adjust character dialogue, change the music up, change character design, implement and tweak the control and user interface scheme based on the Resident Evil 2 remake and adjust for the game. There are varying amounts of level design changes as well, all components of improving a game in order to remake it. At least in the way Capcom goes about remaking their games. Well, since the original remake. Using this as our guideline, we can translate that to a what-if scenario for remaking Code Veronica.
What is this place?
By focus in on Code Veronica's story, which is very lengthy, having considerably more cutscenes than likely every other Resident Evil game besides Resident Evil 6's 3 storylines, I'd expect a lot of trimming and revising of what occurs. Looking at the Resident Evil 4 remake, Luis was modified and had his purpose changed and extended in-game considerably. That might translate to what would occur with Steve, as they share a similar sidekick role for sporadic moments throughout the game. Code Veronica's story sets up Claire searching for her brother Chris, getting captured by Capcom's European division and sent to an island facility to be a prisoner. Wesker, unbeknown to her, air raids the island, indirectly releasing the T-virus and mutated BOWs to wreak havoc, making it a very deadly place for her to be. Chris at the time ironically ends up looking for Claire, but she escapes, rushing to find a way off while also battling it out with the residents of the mansion on the island, leading to bigger and darker insight of more Umbrella transgressions. Quite the mouthful of story to summarize, but the remake for Resident Evil 4 really didn't remove a lot of main story beats, or general story premise. I think it's safe to say most of the story would likely remain in place, but getting rid of some of the cringe, aka Steve and his dialogue.
He thinks he's two people? Okay, that's it. Let's get out of here.
Part of what makes Code Veronica longer is when you finally do play as Chris, you do backtrack and replay areas mostly explored already by Claire. This gives a huge opportunity to restructure and remove the redundancy of the original game. Something Code Veronica had a massive amount of: puzzles and item finding to be placed in another location on the map. Resident Evil 4 Remake didn't really follow the original's puzzles. It instead created different or updated versions of those puzzles, keeping them not too distracting from going through the story. Code Veronica has a lot of backtracking and running around all over, especially the prison area of the island, where streamlining this section entirely can make for a more effective gameplay and replayable experience. When re-going through the Resident Evil 4 Remake, the puzzles aren't bothersome, but if you had to go back to the village several times to place key items non-stop, it'd hinder the experience. Resident Evil 4 Remake's template vastly improves an outdated formula, which luckily Capcom figured out in the Resident Evil 2 Remake and has ever since maintained and nearly perfected. As for Code Veronica's characters and their direction, it's relatively safe to assume changes. I'd expect large changes to Steve, especially his dialogue.
Claire Redfield.
Claire. Nice. I'll remember that. He won't come. You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
As there's a 0% chance Capcom retains a lot of the, let's call them red flags, that won't work in present day games. If being completely honest, objectively Steve is an awful human being based upon his dialogue and actions towards Claire in the original game. Leon and Chris would punch and kick this dude's head off if they heard any of what he had to say in any of those moments. Expect a full rewrite of his dialogue, how he's used, and appearances altogether.
What was that all about?
Making him fall in love with Claire may not even occur if remade, for a lot of the reasons I just mentioned. In order to distance themselves from it and focus more on what is actually important. Claire finding Chris at last, and the twist of Wesker showing up and still being alive.
Long time no see, Chris.
Wesker? He's still alive?
Between that moment and Wesker's reveal of being alive, these two sequences are the keys to the storyline for the game. I do wonder here, as it's revealed in-game that Wesker has some cat-like reflexes and abilities, if Capcom would retain those, well knowing that these could have huge implications for what they do in the Resident Evil 5 remake, if they do eventually get around to doing that. Amongst all the remakes of 2, 3, and 4, we also gather a lot of assets and props that directly apply to and can be re-implemented for Code Veronica. A treasure trove of assets from the Resident Evil 4 Remake's Military Island can directly correlate to Rockford Island for the prison section and military supplies of the island. The Resident Evil 2 Remake also has a prisoner cell area within the RPD. Mansions in both Resident Evil Village and the Resident Evil 4 Remake can be retooled to an extent for the Ashford Mansion, although not exactly the same style of mansions, but if time and money are a concern for Code Veronica and making it, at least there are solutions. The biggest hurdle really becomes the items and areas exclusive to Code Veronica. Antarctica would be the most time-consuming aspect, but I do think Resident Evil 4 Remake did assist a moderate amount for the Antarctic base with Salazar's right-hand boss section in Resident Evil 4 Remake. The interior hallways and freezer aspect provide a lot of the look and feel that Code Veronica's base would have. Now, can we just get Capcom to do the thing that we thought they would have before skipping it? Well, it could be a long while before we see an answer, maybe even longer, with the tease at the end of the Resident Evil 4 Remake proclaiming immediate intent, possibly, for Capcom's choice. What are your hopes for a remake of Code Veronica if Capcom actually does at some point get around to remaking it? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Hittobox.